What's going on, everybody? Josh Engleman for Awesemo.com, and I am back with my DraftKings Week 11 NFL Top 5. All of those words didn't seem to go together, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Now be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all of our other content goes live. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman so you can get updates to these top fives as we get closer to lock. I'll have an update Sunday morning, and then you can find me on our NFL strategy show at 9 a.m. and on NFL Live Before Lock at noon for my final updates. And finally, let me know in the comments section, who are your favorite options at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end? Give me your top guy at each position. I'm going to give you mine. It's only right that you give me yours, so let me know in the comments section. We're going to start at the tight ends. Let's do it. Rounding out the bottom of my top 10 tight ends, we've got Eric Ebron, Hayden Hurst, Logan Thomas, Robert Tonyan, and TJ Hawkinson coming in number 6 on the outside looking in. It leads to number 5. Number 5, Mike Gesicki, 4,300, 10.1 fantasy point projection. Dolphins get a date. That's the first one and the only one that I'm going to try to use with the Broncos. 3-point favorites, actually, in Denver, 45.5 point total. Denver's defense is solid, middle of the pack. This one's just kind of is what it is. It's not all that exciting. Gesicki shows up in the optimal lineup 6.9% of the time. Now that's nice. It's not like you're expecting a monster game. He's just a perfectly acceptable, normal tight end at 4,300. As you can see, we take a little bit of a step up. Number 4, we're going to Dallas Goedert. Only 3,800 at Cleveland. Eagles slight underdogs, but Browns defense, not all that exciting. This is a really nice salary for Goedert. And as you can see, we're entering a different tier. From Gesicki at 6.9, Goedert at 8.7. We're at a different level here. I really like getting to Goedert. I'm not worried at all about this Browns pass defense. And for 3,800, you're getting a talented guy, I believe, a few $100 underpriced. Now at number 3, we've got Noah Fant, 4,500. Taking on the Dolphins. Dolphins pass defense actually really solid, which is a little scary. Not to mention the status for Broncos at quarterback, a little bit up in the air. Don't know if it's going to be Rippon or Locke or someone else. Who knows? None of that is all very good. None of those guys are any good as far as I'm concerned. So I don't think it matters all that much for Noah Fant. 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup. The floor is pretty low, but at 4,500, you're not worried about it all that much. What you're expecting is about 10 fantasy points, and I guess that works. You're hoping for touchdown luck. Tight end's difficult, but Noah Fant is firmly in my top 4 where you can clearly see the delineation in tiers. At number 2, we've got a guy that I feel like I have 50% of every single week. That would be Hunter Henry, 4,600, projected for 11.4 fantasy points. They're taking on the Jets. Chargers, 9.5 point favorites, 46 point total. Jets have the worst pass defense in the league per Football Outsiders DVOA. That sounds pretty good to me. As far as I'm concerned, I want to get guys that face crappy defenses. This is the perfect example of that. Shows up in the optimal 9.2% of the time, just a hair ahead of Noah Fant. There's a little bit of upside, decent chunk of times he can go, north of 20. Again, you're looking for touchdowns at this salary range. None of these guys are the true volume tight ends, the guys that basically play like a wide receiver but have a different distinction. So I'm happy to go to Henry or Fant or Goddard. You could rotate through any one of those 3 guys. I think they're all relatively similar given their salaries, given their upside. And at number 1, a guy that I feel like I haven't talked about all that much, 10.3% chance of being in the optimal lineup, 4,900. It's Mark Andrews. Now, the Ravens are 5-point favorites at home against the Titans, 49.5 point total. Titans defense against the pass, 25th in DVOA. That looks really nice. There's actually an outside chance that Mark Andrews goes for 30 fantasy points. He hits that 1% of the time. I know that's a low number, but that's relatively high for a tight end, particularly a tight end that's in the sub 5K tier. Really like Mark Andrews. Don't mind at all stacking him up with Lamar Jackson in a lineup, but he works whether you have him stacked or not. He's just a really nice tight end. And on a week where we don't have any of the high-end options, I will happily use Mark Andrews as my top tight end. Now we transition to the wide receivers. Number 10, Brandon Cooks. Number 9, Terry McLaurin. Number 8, Adam Thielen. Number 7, Devontae Parker. Number 6, the outside looking into the top 5, that would be $4,900 Jacoby Myers. Now coming in at number 5, We have Robbie Anderson, 6K, 17-point fantasy projection. Matchup against the Lions. It's a pick'em, 47-point total. Lions defense, not all that much to write home about. Run defense stinks, 27th in DVOA. Pass defense, not all that great, 23rd in DVOA. The quarterback position for Carolina, a little bit up in the air. Not entirely sure who we're going to see, but I don't really care because of the 6K price tag. Robbie Anderson goes north of 30 fantasy points like 14% of the time. Shows up in the optimal lineup about 14% of the time. I really like getting to Robbie Anderson. He feels consistent to me. I just always feel comfortable having him. I don't know what it is, but I just assume that I'm going to put him in my lineup and it's just going to show up with like 18 fantasy points. It's a point more than his projection right now, so I guess I would be happy with that. That's why he's my number 5 receiver this week. Taking a little bit of a step up in tiers, number 4, it's Michael Thomas, 7,300, which I think is just too cheap. I know it didn't go all that well last week, but 18 fantasy point projection, taking on Atlanta. Atlanta really, really bad from a pass defense perspective. Saints are 5-point favorites at home, 50-plus point game total, 28th ranked defense. You know what Michael Thomas can do. 16% chance of being in the optimal lineup, 19% chance of going for 30 plus. Even if Michael Thomas doesn't get in the end zone, you expect, at least generally speaking, to see him pick up a lot of targets, a lot of receptions. So even if he doesn't score, 10 for 100 is still on the table. It's a little bit different with Drew Brees out, but I think that increases the high end for Michael Thomas, the ability to get free for a couple touchdowns, those type of games. You might lose a little bit of the dink and dunk volume you get out of Drew Brees, but I'm willing to take my chances, and that's why Michael Thomas is number 4. Basically in a tie with Michael Thomas, but just getting there based on rounding, number 3, Keenan Allen, 7,400, just shy of 20-point fantasy point projection, and the Chargers have that matchup against the Jets, which is clearly incredible. 9.5-point favorites, a 46-point game total, and the absolute worst pass defense in the league. That is what I have my eye on. Keenan Allen goes north of 30, 19% of the time. Same exact odds of being in the optimal as Michael Thomas, 15.9%. You can flip-flop those guys and feel pretty good about it, but I expect Keenan Allen to be pretty popular. Anytime you can get one of the better wide receivers in the league against the Jets, I assume everyone is going to be looking at it. As they should. Keenan Allen looks great. Number 3 wideout this week. Number 2, we're heading to Minnesota, but it's not Adam Thielen. Give me Justin Jefferson. 6K, which is an incredible price tag right now. 17.3 fantasy point projection. Taking on the Cowboys, a team that has been not all that great, but you could really run out any NFC East team, and it's probably not going to matter. 7-point favorites at home, 47.5-point total. Cowboys' run defense, abysmal, 28th in the league. Pass defense is 18th, so about average. I'll take what I can get here. 14% chance of going for north of 30, 16% chance of being in the optimal lineup. I think Jefferson fits any sort of build you're looking to do. 6K is perfect. Whether you're trying to go a little bit stars and scrubsy or for a balanced build, I think Justin Jefferson works no matter what. I love the price. I love the matchup. I love everything about it. That's how Justin Jefferson ends up at number 2, but he's not number 1. Like it could be anybody else. 8,600, but it's well worth the price tag. 22.3 projected fantasy points. We're at Indy. Packers actually 2.5-point underdogs, 51-point game total. We're going to the big man, Davante Adams. This is a tough matchup. I don't think that he's going to be as popular as I feel he should be. Colts are 4th against the run, 4th against the pass. And that's a tough spot when you're trying to roster an $8,600 wide receiver. We don't have the same sort of like Mike Davis at 4K value just lurking out there either. It's still Davante Adams, and it's still, subsequently Aaron Rodgers. I'll take my chances against a tough defense. Davante Adams goes for north of 30, 26.6% of the time. Now, you might need that because of his price tag, but he shows up in the optimal just shy of 17% of the time. Whether or not I'm nervous about the matchup, it's not changing anything for me. Davante Adams is the best wide receiver option on the slate. He is worth the money. Now we transition to the running backs. Number 10, Miles Sanders. Number 9, James Conner. Number 8, Antonio Gibson. Number 7, Aaron Jones. And number 6, on the outside looking in, that would be DeAndre Swift. Looking pretty good against Carolina. Carolina run defense stinks. It's not good enough to get into the top 5, though. Coming in, number 5, we have last week's value play du jour. 6,800 this week instead of 4K. That would be Mike Davis. 17.6 fantasy point projection, taking on the Lions. It's a pick'em, 47-point total, crappy defense. 27th against the run, 23rd against the pass. Both of those things matter for Mike Davis. He's a threat both ways. Goes for north of 30, 10% of the time. That feels a little bit lower than I would have expected, but I think we're way more concentrated in the middle for someone like Davis. Shows up in the optimal 14.6% of the time. I know people are probably going to be off him a little bit. You see the price go up by 2,800. You see the bad game last week. I don't see any reason you should be getting away from him. Mike Davis is still a fantastic play this week, regardless of what happened last week. You got to put that one out of your head. I'll be rostering Mike Davis quite a bit because I still don't think 6,800 is enough for a guy that's should be involved in the passing game as much as he is, regardless of who the quarterback ends up being for the Panthers. Now, if you want to spend some serious coin, grab my number 4 running back, Alvin Kamara. Whew, it's going to be tough to say. 9,200. That is insanity. 21.7 fantasy point projection, as I mentioned before, taking on the Falcons. Falcons' run defense has been solid. They are 7th, but 28th against the pass. You're getting it from all angles from Kamara. You never know where he's going to be or what style of play it's going to be. Anxious to see how this works with Jameis Winston. Can't imagine it's that big of a letdown. I assume that Kamara is going to look like quite the safety valve for Winston if things aren't going right. When you have Kamara coming out of the backfield, you're probably feeling pretty good. 20.7% chance of going north of 30. That's going to be pretty helpful at 9,200. 15% chance of being in the optimal lineup. I get it. This is a big salary. It's a big price tag, but you know what you're getting out of Alvin Kamara. He has the ability to fill it up. This could be, 15 plus carries, 15 plus targets. He's that kind of guy, especially against the Falcons. Love Kamara, but there are better options. One of those options would be at number 3, James Robinson, 6,400. Jacksonville taking on Pittsburgh. Big time underdogs, 10.5 point dogs, 46-point total against top 5 defense in the league. All of these signs point to a real rough go. But 6,400 for a guy that can catch some passes out of the backfield for a team that will likely be behind, that's what I'm looking for. Might not go for 30 all that frequently, 9.9% of the time it happens, but he does show up in the optimal almost 16% of the time. That's because he's 6,400 and not 9,200 like Alvin Kamara. Robinson feels a lot like Mike Davis to me. The salary works no matter what sort of lineup you're trying to play. And I just love how much work he gets in the passing game, so I am happy to go to James Robinson. Well, this one wasn't all that much fun last week. Number 2, 5,400. I'm going to Duke Johnson. 15.6 fantasy point projection. Here's the biggie, though. Taking on the Patriots. Houston's a 2.5 point dog, still 49-point game total. The Patriots defense is really just shockingly bad. 31st against the run, 30th against the pass. We're talking about Duke Johnson having a 7% chance of going north of 30. That's not really why you're rostering him. Anything into the 20s is kind of where you're trying to go. 15.7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. That takes him just a hair ahead of James Robinson. Once again, I'm trying to put last week out of my mind. I'm going straight back to Mike Davis, as I mentioned before, and I'm definitely going straight back to Duke Johnson. Finally, coming in number 1, it's got to be Dalvin Cook. A full $9,000 salary, 24.9 fantasy point projection. Minnesota taking on the Cowboys, 7-point favorites, 47.5 point total, and the Cowboys' run defense stinks. 28th against the run. Dalvin Cook with a 33% chance of going north of 30 fantasy points. He shows up in the optimal 26.6% of the time. Yeah, 26.6. That's quite a bit more than everybody else. Look at the gap between Cook and Johnson. There is no doubt right now. Dalvin Cook is the clear top play at either running back, wide receiver, or tight end. If you're picking anybody in the flex, it's got to be Dalvin Cook. Try to get him in cash. Can't imagine not having him. He just looks fantastic clear across the board. Now, if the ownership gets really high in large field GPPs, I understand wanting to go a different direction. He's not that perfect in a large-scale GPP. Small field stuff, cash games, there's no way around it. Dalvin Cook's the best play. Now, before we get into the quarterbacks one last time, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman so you can get updates to these sim results over the weekend and before the shows start Sunday morning. I'll be on at 9 a.m. and at noon. And finally, again, let me know in the comments, who are your top 4 options? Your top quarterback, your top running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Let me know all of your top options in the comments. Now we're on to the quarterbacks. Coming in number 10, Ben Roethlisberger. Number 9, Aaron Rodgers. Number 8, Phillip Rivers. 7, Joe Burrow. We're going to Tua at number 6. He couldn't make the top 5, and that is because we've got Lamar Jackson coming in number 5, 7,300, just shy of 24 fantasy point projection. Baltimore taking on Tennessee, 5-point favorites, 49.5 point total, 25th ranked pass defense, 19th ranked rushing defense. Both of those things should help out Lamar considerably. A threat on the ground, clearly. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know. And, a passing matchup that should benefit him. These are the type of matchups that I feel like Lamar Jackson just goes out and stomps a hole in the competition. He goes for north of 30, just shy of 25% of the time. Shows up in the optimal lineup at quarterback 6.5% of the time. It's a little bit of a step up above Tua, so we're in a little bit of a different tier. I don't mind spending $7,300 on Lamar. This is a really good spot for it. Now this one's pretty fun. If Teddy Bridgewater ends up being out, $4,800 PJ Walker is a guy that I have my eye on. 19.8 fantasy point projection. Detroit's defense, not very good. 47-point game total in a pick'em. Looks fine. Shows up in the optimal 7.2% of the time. If PJ Walker showed up 17% of the time, you'd have him in a lot more lineups. That's almost double what I actually have him. 12% chance of going for north of 30. I really have a good feeling about PJ Walker at 4,800 if he has to be in this game. Now, if it's Bridgewater, he's probably going to look kind of solid too, just because the matchup's fantastic. Not a lot of people are going to be loving PJ Walker this week, but I'm in a position where he is worth the savings on a slate where you have Dalvin Cook at 9K, Devontae Adams north of 9K. This is where you might be able to save a little money, and that's why I like PJ Walker this week. Now, if PJ Walker isn't your cup of tea, number 3, Justin Herbert, fresh haircut, 6,800, 22.5 point fantasy projection, big favorites against the Jets, 9.5 points, and the absolute worst pass defense in the league. Clearly a perfect pairing with Keenan Allen. That stack looks nice. 30 points or more, 22% of the time. The optimal quarterback, 7.4% of the time. This just seems like a day where Herbert gets you 25 and you don't even really bat an eye. And there's an outside chance that he just nukes the slate. That's how bad the Jets are. Don't miss Herbert. Make sure you're getting yourself some Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen stacks. They're going to rank pretty high this week. Number 2, and a pretty big step up, number 2, is Deshaun Watson. 6,500. Texans taking on the Pats. Pats defense, as I mentioned before, terrible. 31st against the run, 30th against the pass. That all stands as really good information for Deshaun Watson. Slight underdog, so you expect him to be throwing the entire game. And a 49-point total, you expect some scoring. Watson goes for north of 30 fantasy points 22% of the time. Shows up in the optimal 9% of the time. That's a full 2%, or almost a full 2%, ahead of Justin Herbert. Watson's just too cheap for this particular matchup. I know it's not all that appealing because the Texans aren't very good. It would be really, really nice if Hopkins was still there. Unfortunately, the Texans don't like winning or good players, so they didn't do that. But for this particular week, week 11 in the NFL, it's difficult to get away from Deshaun Watson because the Pats defense stinks so much. Finally, number 1 option for this week. We're staying in that Houston game. I want Cam Newton, 6,200, 23.5 point fantasy point projection, slight favorites, 49-point total, and I don't want to say equally as bad, but also a not very good defense. Houston dead last against the run, 22nd against the pass. Cam goes for north of 24. Cam goes for north of 30 fantasy points, 24.5% of the time, 10.6% chance of being in the optimal. You're hoping that Cam can pick up some red zone rushing carries. pick up a touchdown or two. That's what really puts him into the stratosphere. 6,200 is just too cheap. These guys are really easy to get to as far as I'm concerned, whether that's Newton or Watson. And if you can't tell, I really like the idea of stacking up this game, whether it's Newton and a wide receiver and some sort of bring back, whether maybe Duke Johnson or Watson in the same sort of scenario. I like getting pieces of this game because I think everybody is efficiently priced. If Cam goes for north of 30, 24.5% of the time, I want to make sure I have my shares. That puts Cam Newton numero uno. If you're playing on FanDuel this weekend, be sure to look around. You should be able to find a link to my top 5 for FanDuel. This is the top 5 for DraftKings. I'm happy to bring it to you. Check back next week where you get 2 separate top 5s. One for the Thanksgiving slate, one for the Sunday main slate. You're getting all of the goods next week. Extra content for Thanksgiving though. Best of luck this Sunday. I will talk to you guys again this coming Thursday.